Hello, I'm Dr. Don Eisner, and I'm Dean of Eisner Institute for Professional Studies. I'm here today to talk a little bit about precognition. Basically, precognition is essentially looking into the future, or what purports to be the future. In 2018, I wrote a book called 2034 to 1990 Into the Multiverse. It involved an individual who had to travel back in time to try to avert one existential crisis only to meet up with another. In that book, seemingly, there are a number of parallels with the COVID-19 pandemic that occurred late 2019, 2020. In the book, I discuss, science fiction book, of course, I discuss that it initiated in New York in March 2020 and is spread globally, exponentially. There are a number of items that definitely parallel COVID-19. I can't mention them all, but I will give a brief overview. It affects all ages. Now, what's interesting about that is when the epidemic first occurred, it was thought only to affect older individuals and those with pre-existing illnesses. However, we now know that children can be affected. It also affects all organs, respiratory, lungs, kidneys, brain damages. It's all mentioned in my little scenario. By the way, later in 2020, I published that story, the 2034 to 1990, into a larger collection of chronicles here. I mentioned that there's quarantines. Hundreds of thousands of people's lives are disrupted. There's evacuations. I also mentioned face masks. Now, why would that ever come up? Well, the person who sort of developed a cure went on television and was wearing a face mask in a remote section of the studio. Interestingly, the reporter also was wearing a face mask. The next person who came on the show was a critic and ridiculed the person who just presented a potential cure. Sound familiar? Yes. In my scenario, there were anti-scientific and anti-medical biases. Now, it could be argued that a single item alone is just a fluke, doesn't really mean anything. But I think if you start stringing together a lot of these items in the book, it seems to go way beyond regular statistics. Start in New York, spread globally, no vaccines, multi-organ damage. Also, lastly, the name that I gave to the pandemic was OSID, overstimulation immune disease. Not too coincidentally, it rhymes with COVID, OSID and COVID. Could all of this be, as I say, just a big coincidence? Even random synchronicities? Or did I peer a little into the future? Actually, it may not have been the future. The future may have already existed, and I just happened to pierce into an alternative, parallel universe. Well, I'll let you be the judge.